Welcome to March's version of Drupal Providence. Tonight we are joined by Ofer, who's going to be talking about DrupalPod. He is going to be teaching us how to embed DrupalPod into your client projects. Before we get to Ofer, though, we have a few reminders. There is a LinkedIn group, so if you're on LinkedIn and you want to get updates about Drupal Providence, you can join us there, see us there. It's not overly verbose in its posting. Usually I post about upcoming events, and then I will post the video from past events, so that way everybody can share it, see it if they missed it. So it's pretty quiet over there. So if that's kind of what you're looking for, you can join the LinkedIn group. I did say there were videos. There are videos. YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We try to capture video for every meetup and post it out to our YouTube channel. There's also a Slack channel. If you go to the Providence Slack channel, you can talk to people from the Providence area. But of course, it's the internet, so you can really talk to people from anywhere. We'd like to say a big thank you to the New England Drupal Camp because they sponsor our Slack. Sorry, not our Slack, our Zoom. So this is not going to cut off after 45 minutes of talking. It will go on until the last person leaves. And that's all because the New England Drupal Camp provides us with a Zoom account. So thanks to them. I will let you in on a little secret. New England Drupal Camp in 2022 is going to be in person. And it is looking like it may be the 18th and 19th of November. So stay tuned to your inboxes for a save the date for that in the coming weeks. We've got some other Drupal events going on. I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you're not, I'm going to make you aware. So we got Drupal Dev Days, which is actually next week in Belgium. So if you have nothing to do next week, or just want to go to Belgium and need an excuse, Drupal Dev Days is the place to be. The Boston Drupal Meetup is happening virtually. That's online. This month's theme is April Fool's themed lightning talks. So that is definitely sure to please. That's happening on the 12th of April. And of course, DrupalCon Portland is happening towards the end of the month in Portland, Oregon, in person. Chris Wells is disappointed it's not Portland, Maine, but hey, you know what? You can't win them all. Drupal Camp New Jersey is happening in Princeton in May. That is also in person. All these in-person events, it's great to start seeing those happening again. Drupal Camp New Jersey, I believe, is in the process of looking for sessions. So if you have something to talk about, Drupal Camp New Jersey could be the place for you. So keep that in mind. So this is our first Drupal Providence meetup of 2022. We are on a quarterly schedule. So here is the schedule for this year. Our next meetup will be June 2nd. We'll have one in September and one in December. They are all in need of speakers. So if you have something you want to talk about, or you have somebody you know who has something that they want to talk about, you let me know, reach out to me, and we can see if we can make that happen. You can find out more at drupalprovidence.org, and you can also sign up for that on the Meetup page. So that's enough about me. Let's turn it over to Ofer Shaal, who is the creator of DrupalPod, to hear more about DrupalPod and how we add it to our project.
Hi, everyone. So I'll start with DrupalPod. First of all, my name is Ofer Shaal, and I'm a Drupal core contributor. I've been around the Drupal community for many years. I work at Phase 2 as a senior front-end developer. So day to day, I build web components and interesting front-endy things. The reason behind, or what brought DrupalPod together, was actually a Dries note, where Dries was sharing a video, how difficult it is to find for a new contributor, where do they go to even start? I think it was just about commenting on an issue or something. And then I told myself, well, that is difficult, it's true, but imagine you know which issue you need to take care of. How do you now set up your system to be able to contribute or test or anything like that? Around that time, I saw a service called GitPod, which is a cloud-based full development environment, and started thinking about ideas and kind of a MacGyver way of took some pieces from GitPod. I worked with DDev because I really liked how it allowed me to create local development environment. I approached Randy and was like, hey, can we make DDev work also in the cloud? And at the beginning it was like, what? And slowly, we start working on all these different issues, because when DDev works locally, and for whoever doesn't know DDev is a similar tool to, if you're familiar with Lando or Doxel. It's basically creating your local environment when you need a PHP project using Docker, and it remove a lot of these settings or difficulties and allow the whole team to have a similar environment, whether you have a Mac, Linux, or a Windows machine. So the DrupalPod idea is what started the idea of like being able to put a Drupal project that are usually complex, built with DDev, sitting on GitPod. Sitting on GitPod, that means that, let me show you for a second GitPod. Yeah, so that's the service. It's an open source project. There's 50 hours for free for everyone. Or if you're an open source contributor, you actually get unlimited time on GitPod. It's a very cool service. And the promise of that service is that instead of having even a computer or a development environment, everything happened in the browser. So the whole environment, the whole setup, everything is in the browser. You can really run it from your phone or iPad. Trust me, I tried. So DrupalPod came about in order to allow people to contribute to Drupal easily, which is a complex thing. So I created a browser extension that know how to read Drupal issue pages. And we have a DrupalPod documentation here. If you'll go to drupal.org/project/DrupalPod, at the bottom, you'll see documentation. Here's the documentation of exactly how to work with it, how to open it. So when you combine the browser extension that knows what to identify from the issue page, that goes ahead and open things for you in GitPod, you would get this screen eventually. And what you would see here with the welcome screen, you're going to get a preview of the website that you're working on. Right now, this is Umami, and at the bottom is terminal. This whole interface is VS Code. If you're familiar with local VS Code, the online VS Code is very, very similar. So yeah, so what you see here is GitPod. This means this whole thing is in the browser, which was amazing at the time. I think it's still amazing. GitHub has competing solution that's supposed to provide the same, but still lagging behind the abilities of GitPod. Also, there's no way for you to test it or try it for free or anything. So it's called Code Spaces, very, very similar solution. Also Dockerized. And what we're going to do today, DrupalPod was just the introduction of how I even got to it and what I realized what we can do beyond open source contribution, which are awesome. And all of us should participate when we can. So DrupalPod really did made the whole setup, especially if we're talking about contribution days, that would take sometimes half an hour, sometimes few hours to a day for people to set up their Drupal project on the machine. All of a sudden, all we needed is people to install a browser extension, click on a button in the issue pages, and they have their whole system ready to go. and have a full Drupal website running, including drush commands, xdebug, a lot of the tools that we have PHP unit. So many tools that you need for development. And even if you just want to test something, so you could use the same thing. You don't need to touch any part of the development. And as you can see here, there's a URL. This is private for me, but I could share my whole system. I could share some of the ports, like this one is running on 8080. I have PHP, my admin. I have Mailhog. There's like few services that come with DDEV, and you can share them as well. You can have other people working with you. Most of your favorite extensions would work here and go with you from a project to project, whether you like VS Code themes, dark or light, all these settings are going to go with you, and we can go to that soon in the more Gitpod specific things. So after the Drupal contribution part, what I realize is now I really want to make sure that the projects that that I work with clients, that would be really nice to work with, because also at phase 2, we have many developers, and every time a developer needs to onboard a project, there's a process. Even that internally we're using Doxel, or it doesn't really matter which one, there's always something. We need to give them access to something in Acquia, and they need something on Pantheon, and they were not added to GitHub. There's like so many steps in how do we get someone on a project. And at the same time, we have multiple projects running and brilliant people that work on different projects, and sometimes we need their help. And all of a sudden, if I need help of someone that's not on my project, it can take them a long time to get the project I'm working on their machine. So realizing that if I can encapsulate it in Gitpod, anyone that I need help from can click a button and work on my project, which is awesome. And it's possible. So throughout the last year or two, as I'm working with Randy and some other good folks, got DDEV to support more and more of the Gitpod feature to the level today, version 119. Now it's 119.1. DDEV doesn't need any special settings for Gitpod. If you turn on Gitpod in this, if you install DDEV in a new Gitpod environment, DDEV would recognize this is Gitpod, this is not a regular Linux or Windows or Mac, and would know exactly how to work with it. So it makes that part much better. I have a few projects that are from before that time, so I have a few overrides that were needed before and things like that. But now I'll show you like, what does it mean to take a client project and make it completely work in Gitpod. So where do we go from here? Just so you know about, if you don't know about DDEV or Gitpod. So one of the advantages specifically with this solution, if the other team members still prefer working locally, there's nothing preventing them from doing so. So the whole setup and system stay the same. There is a file that you will see. This is probably the more complex version of it. Let me make the screen a little bigger. The Gitpod YAML is where everything starts. By having this setup, Gitpod would know how this project needs to load. If anyone's interested, we even have solution if for some reason you cannot add Gitpod YAML to your project, which I recommend, and I'll show you what are the benefits of having that. There is a way to use Gitpod as a machine in the cloud that load any repository you want and work from there. But if you can do that, that's even better. Show you a little trick here. If you type DDEV xdebug and you go to the extension and you click on listen to xdebug, then from here, I'm going to open index.php. and put a breakpoint. Now, when I refresh this page, ta-da, Xdebug works out of the box. So this is the DrupalPod setup, but it works very similar to now every client project I have. So it makes life so nice, and I highly recommend that. So that's the Xdebug part. Each workspace like that, if you don't touch it, stay for 30 minutes, and then it goes to sleep. If it goes to sleep, you can always wake it up. It will stay there for 2 weeks unless you pin that environment. So you see I have here 4 environments running right now. These 3, because I want to show them, are pinned, so they're going to be on top. But if I'll scroll down, you see like a lot of workspaces that are dormant. If I need any code that I forgot to push or anything, I had electricity problem, whatever it is, everything that happened there, stay there. So if you're afraid of my local machine and what am I going to do if something happened, any work you forgot to save is saved for at least 2 weeks. When you pin them, it goes even further. So for the DDEV, before we get there, DDEV and Gitpod, both of them has Discord server support. Both of them are supporting community in a great way. Both of them are open source projects. Highly recommend to join them and see the friendly people there, because whatever question you have, there's multiple people who are gonna come and help you. One of the latest additions to DDEV is Devget, which I think is not known enough. If I'll find the documentation for it, probably not now. But the idea in general is that if you need, one of the things I use it for in a project, I needed Solar. So in the older times of DDEV, in order to put Solar on, you need to follow someone's instruction. Go here, configure this, put this together, until it kind of work. And nowadays, you can use DDEV-get. And what DDEV-get does is it looking into, I don't think they call it recipes. Oh, thank you so much, Chris. Look at that. I have a working URL. Is that the one? Yeah, these are the, okay. So these are the packages. So DDEV-get says, instead of following manual instructions, DDEV can follow these instructions. So people supporting specific project, like here we see MongoDB, Elasticsearch, and all these things. And, whatever you need to your project, like I needed Solar, I think I typed DDEV-get Solar, something that simple, and all of a sudden Solar is working, which was great because I didn't like the last time I had to set it up manually. This is the documentation page for DDEV-get. You'll get a list. This list is ongoing. I think people can even host it on their own repo because it doesn't have to be part of the Drud organization. So really, really cool solution. And again, every time I need to work on more clients project that has more complexity, I feel like I'm in good hands. So now we're going to jump into the setup. So the project I initially started with, this one, was actually running Doxel. And I tried to make Doxel working for Gitpod. I tried working with Doxel people. I don't know, still not there. I think they're working on it, but I'm not sure what that status. The good news, it doesn't really matter because Doxel was used for people to run this project locally and using Docker. So it's all very, very similar. And all I needed, I can put DDEV. All DDEV needs, or all a Drupal project needs, is probably a working composer to get the code running and all the dependencies. We need the database and we need some media files or using the proxy, the file proxy. So I mentioned earlier, Gitpod YAML is where we're starting. You can see here, I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'll show you like the structure of what is this Gitpod YAML. By the way, if you have any questions while I'm showing things, feel free to ask it, or in the chat, which I can read while I'm talking here, or interrupt me, which is also good. Okay, so I created, while working with DDev and working on DrupalPod, I created a custom Docker image. And you don't need to know much about this because I'll just tell you, it just works. You still have the ability to customize it and add to it whatever you need. But the good news is, as you can see, the image here is being called from this file. So it's gitpod docker file. And this one is actually loading a DrupalPod custom image. It means it has DDev 119. I need to upgrade it into 119.1. And it's loading everything you need. So it's a very small environment. It doesn't take much space. And DDev takes care of everything we need PHP-wise. In this specific project, I needed rsync. So what you see here is that it starts from the DrupalPod image, and we're using the DrupalPod image in client project because it doesn't have any DrupalPod specific things. It's just the setup in general. It runs a little update for Linux to check all the packages, and then it installed the software of rsync because I need it for one of the systems here. Once I have that, I have a custom image. Custom image means that the environment I will open, when I'll open terminal, I can run DDev. That's what it gives me. Inside Gitpod YAML, we have starter tasks. There's full documentation. You can dive even deeper, but what you really want to know, there's two main ones. Init is everything happen before someone open a workspace. What you see here is a Gitpod workspace. Command is what happened when someone opened the workspace or we turn on a workspace that timed out before. So this is the list of commands that are going to run before. And what do I mean before someone open a workspace? The way Gitpod works is it allows me to work with a team. So anyone that open a branch, open a PR, commit something, when that happens, Gitpod gets a signal to run these commands on that specific branch. So while the main branch can have my site ready, if I created a branch of Fix homepage, now the Fix homepage has its own set of commands, database, whatever I need there, they are separate. So anyone else is going to open main, going to see the same exact thing of main, and anyone that's going to open that other branch, going to get that other branch. So in short, what do we have here? I like to, when things are a little more complex, I created a .gitpod directory, so I can put scripts here, and it can keep this simple and clean. So config.gitpod YAML. This is going to be this one. I needed this for this specific project, and that was setting and local environments. This was the local part wasn't important, so that's what happened here. DDev use Docker images for the PHP, for all the different systems that DDev is using. It needs to download these images. The good news, these images download when no one's watching, right? Like when someone commits something, Gitpod already running these things, and DDev start downloading the images. When that sequence finish running, anyone from my team that's going to open that branch going to get the result of it and doesn't need to wait for this to run. At the end of, and this is called, the init is in Gitpod language, they call it pre-builds. Then we're loading project setup. And I try to keep project simple, and this should be familiar for most of you. When you need to set up a project, it's please run composer. This is a DDev command to get databases, and they support, you can do DDev pool Acquia, DDev pool Pantheon. I think they have others. So one of the latest things they added, which helped me on this project, is DDev pool Git. So I can actually set it up to load from another GitHub repo, that all what's existing in the other GitHub repo is a copy of the database. And because in this Drupal 9 project, we're using config, I need once in a while to update the database. Otherwise, the config would take care of everything else. So we run composer install. We're getting the latest database because I now need files because we're using file proxy, but I could also download files here. I run drush config import, drush update database, and drush CR because it's always good to run drush CR. Then, because we're using Solr, I'm also asking it to clear any Solr content, re-index all the content. And on this project, I mentioned I work at phase 2, we do web components and all that. We need the updated design system. So that's this script. It's basically DDEV is running design system setup, which these commands also not going to be so complicated. Go to this directory, yarn install, and then yarn build. It builds the system setup. So anyone from the team that open this page will get this, usually plus terminal. So what usually could take a day or a few days in our company for various computer Mac issues, all of a sudden we have the person can go to, let's go to the project here. And you can see all the pull requests, the issues, the code. I added the little Gitpod icon here, but the way Gitpod works, if you need to know, take any GitHub URL, add in front of it gitpod.io/pound, and that's all you need. Now, Gitpod, I forgot it either. Now Gitpod would load that specific branch that you're on. It works the same with PRs and everything. And when someone click on a project now, the database is the latest database, everything working. This is it's in my browser. I can also open it to an external window that would open over here. The search works. So everything, this is a full Drupal site working. It's great. I have my Drash commands. I have Xdebug working. If I'm going to look at the code here, you see I have the, sorry about the colors, but I have the theme suggestion. So a lot of these things that sometimes I need to set up or remember to set up, if this is a good setup, all the developers that are using Gitpod are going to benefit from the same setup, which is really, really awesome. So if I need the help of anyone, now they really need just clicking a button, waiting 30 seconds, and they're on my project, or I can share with them in Gitpod. You can click share running workspace. And if you're familiar with live share of VS Code, once I do that, this URL on top that is now private and no one can go to, now another person can go into my Linux machine in the cloud. So they can really, really see exactly what's happening. Or if I change something in the database and there's something very specific to what happened here, nothing changed in the files, I can also share the snapshot, which will give me a URL I can share with others, and they'll get the exact database state of my project. So this gives me incredible debug opportunities and reduce so much of the figuring out what are the steps I made to get into whatever problems I got myself into. You can see at the bottom of the menu, it has open in VS Code and open VS Code Insiders. What would happen if I click on these? Gitpod as a cloud environment, gonna stay the same, cloud and working and doing everything great. It will open my local VS Code. For whatever reason, I prefer not a browser, but a real VS Code environment, which are very similar. That is what this button gonna do. Also, you should know some of Microsoft extensions like LiveShare, like Copilot. In their license, they wouldn't allow, it's not legal to run it in the browser that is outside of Microsoft domain or something like that. But once you open it in your own VS Code, there's no problem. So it's your own VS Code, but the whole system is actually still running in Gitpod. Okay, and since I think something was 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 away for too long. It went to sleep, so now I'm going to wake it up again. We have, and this one also, okay. We have an open source project for our web components called Outline. I'm going to share in the chat. It's github.com/phase2/outline. And what you would notice that this project has in the README open in Gitpod. You can try it and see for yourself. So this is not a full Drupal site. This is more of, it alerts me that I have a similar workspace already running, but I can ask it to open it anyway. This is a node project using web components, but it has all these benefits. And I've been using it multiple times with team members of someone working on something, on a specific issue, on another team. I can, each one of the tabs I have here hold, it could be the same project in a different branch with a different database. So I can run multiple things like that in parallel. Nothing happened on my computer, so it doesn't really matter how fast or slow it is. Even internet usage, there's not much internet bandwidth happening. When you run Composer install, or when you would run npm install, that all happen in the cloud between Gitpod that usually run on Google Cloud, download from wherever it is. So your machine is not really affected. You're just seeing the display, and whatever character needs to appear here, that would change. So this is another project that I have from a few years ago, not in phase 2, and same simple commands. If I need a Drupal project running, that's in the init level. It's running Composer install. It's pulling database and files from Pantheon, update the database, config import, and cache refresh. And if you'll see the Gitpod YAML, again, we're asking DDEV to download the images, environment setup, all these short setup. I think this is an older one, so it needed still a few DDEV setups, but then when it's done, it opened the preview. If I'll scroll in the terminal, you would usually see what happened during pre-build. It's a little messy in the text. Although here, I think because I woke it up again, we wouldn't see the whole pre-build, but this one would show me. So this is the outline project that I told you, the node project. If I'm looking at the terminal on the top, I can see that the yarn install, which is something that takes time, but in this project, no one needs to wait for that time, because if I made an update, now it's running in, I don't know, 2 minutes or something, it's finished. Whoever's opening that project doesn't need to wait for yarn install. They're just gonna open it, and it's gonna run a yarn storybook, and they're gonna get the storybook, open things, create PRs, everything from the VS Code environment. Yeah, so that's flawless. It's a pleasure to work with. It's really, really like, it gives you so much flexibility, and it doesn't make anyone else from the team, it doesn't force anyone else from the team to work this way. So other people still believe in local environment, which is great. And they, the project itself, all it really has when you wanted to support Gitpod is adding a Gitpod YAML. In the structure of Gitpod YAML, you can also say which extensions this project requires. So I might have a lot of my own favorite extension. Gitpod would remember to bring these extensions with me, but the project can define, we work with Tailwind, we need some lit plugin, we need support for MDX, we want a code spell checker. So all these things would come with the extension and wouldn't be attached to your user. You also define to Gitpod which ports are you being used. Here we're using Storybook, so it's 6042. And what happened when they open, is it automatically public or not? And this belongs to the GitHub, what I mentioned, the pre-builds, when things happen in the background, when a push happen, a commit, a PR, all these things. It's a set of rules of how it happens. When you have this setting, plus Gitpod has a bot on GitHub that allow to make that connection and call that pre-build, which all happen in the Gitpod server. So your code, nothing else would happen. I allowed someone in. I think is okay. Okay, I see a question in the chat. Do GitHub and GitLab repos work the same way? Yeah, as far as I know, it does. Gitpod supports out of the box GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. If your project for some reason cannot work on others' servers or anything like that, Gitpod itself, let me find it, is an open source project. So you could put it on your own server and have it, running whatever setup you need. Gitpod self-hosted. So it'll tell you exactly how to install it, what needs to be done. So if you have that limitation, that is a possibility. I want to show you, if you have more questions, feel free to ask in the chat or here. I want to show you a few more things that are happening in the dashboard. So gitpod.io/workspaces would always show me all the workspaces that either are open or dormant. And I'll see which branch it belongs to, how many changes I have that I didn't push would appear right here. I can even download it. I think it's like a doc or something. Didn't really try using it, but there is a download option. I can share it with other data sharing workspace, or I can just remove it if I want to clean it up. Again, if it's not pinned after 2 weeks, it will disappear from this list. They have a setting page, which is where you can add, this is very important. So environment variables, when you have secrets of your project and you don't want to put them in the code, you can actually add them here. So for example, here, I have my setting for the Git author email and Git author name. If it's GitHub under phase 2, it's going to use my phase 2 email account because that's the work stuff that I'm working on. And any other project going to use my personal email whenever I commit stuff. I use if this, then that, and I need a token as part of actually DrupalPod. Nobody else has access to it because that token is in my environment variable. So each one can have their own environment variable. Preferences, you can choose if you want the latest version of VS Code or regular. They also support, if you're familiar with, I'm sure you are, some of you, Phpstorm. So the same way I could open VS Code locally, Phpstorm have a similar, works the same way pretty much. You need a license for the Phpstorm. It's locally. You click a button. I think you do it here. I forgot if you can do it after you open the workspace, but if you do it through here, Phpstorm would ask you to do so, and you'll have the whole Phpstorm set up with everything you're used to, including the Xdebug. And the Gitpod setup is still in the cloud. So on your machine, nothing runs, actually, beside the actual local programs here. They added projects and teams recently, fairly recently. So in teams, you can see I have a DDev, I have phase 2 stuff, I have my own account. And under each one of these projects, I can add this project in here. It helps you to see what's going on with pre-builds, where things are at, if you need to stop something, invite members. The benefit of a project of a team, as I showed you the environment variable before, we can also have project environment variable. So instead of a secret that's being kept in my account, it's being kept at the project level. So any user can get these secrets without directly accessing them. Settings we showed, I think. Oh, this is all part of the team. And yeah, so that's the Gitpod interface. Great community, great documentation. They're still working on many new improvements and features. And yeah, they're super friendly when there is any issue to go ahead and fix it. Do you have some questions? Something I skipped?
Yeah, Ofer, Bob was asking, do GitHub and GitLab repos work the same way?
Yeah, So I said, yeah, it's GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket are supported. Regarding DrupalPod, which you mentioned at the beginning, I'm trying to get, so today DrupalPod is in GitHub, but where I really want it to be is under Drupal's GitLab self-hosted service. And that what that would mean is the near future DrupalPod, when you open any issue page, you automatically would have push access to code without doing any additional steps because it's already where the Drupal code is hosted, as well as Drupal is in charge of telling us if that person has permission to push code or not.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask your question, or if you want, you can type it in the chat. I will be more than happy to ask it for you.
So when you spin up something on Gitpod, where are these servers located? Is there any like indication of that?
Yes and no. So as far as I know, a bunch of it is in Google Cloud. I don't know which parts. We can ask them more specific. I see that when I open my workspace, do you see this WS-US38? So they have these clusters. So I do know US mean US and Europe getting something else. I don't know if that's what you meant, but basically all these environments like Gitpod is in charge of them, running them and doing everything needed to be them. Most of it's supposed to be in Google Cloud. And I mentioned before, you can also self-host it. So this whole operation could run on your own server without Gitpod. I mean, without Gitpod servers.
Do you know what the differences are between the paid account and like the self-hosted? Or is it just support?
Let's see. You mean between the SaaS version and the self-hosted?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking? So I think self-hosted until 10 users, you're basically getting the whole thing and it doesn't cost anything. If you need more than 10 users, then you pay for it. If you don't pay for it, I think you are missing pre-builds. I think something's here. Maybe everything here? No, because this you're getting. I think mainly pre-builds and Snapshot, I guess, is what you would be missing if you have more than 10 and you don't want to pay for self-hosted. So pre-build is that thing that builds the environment as soon as I commit code. Snapshot is the thing that create URL with my exact environment, everything, even if I didn't push code or whatever happened in the database, that's what Snapshot does. Yeah, and like I mentioned, if you are involved in open source project, you would get unlimited hours using Gitpod, which I enjoy very much.